Welcome to Front Office Pros. We are heading into week 13 of the fantasy football season. Joe and I are here to give you some trade targets ahead of your trade deadline to help you make the playoffs and hopefully win your leagues.
Hike!
Yeah, my first trade target, I'm going to go with wide receiver Zay Flowers. I feel like could be a good week to try to get him, even though he had an okay game against the Chargers tonight. I mean, 5 for 25, did get a receiving touchdown, also had a 37-yard rushing touchdown towards the end of the game. I mean, not huge from a yardage perspective, but he did find the end zone two different times. Nice to see him, the Ravens, get him involved. I think that trend could continue with Mark Andrews being out, and maybe the owner that has Zay Flowers, if they're competing for a playoff spot, Flowers is going to be on bye this week for week 13. So now could be the time to try to get him. And they have a pretty favorable schedule coming up after the bye. They face the Rams, then the Jaguars, who you can definitely pass on them. 49ers secondary has also been susceptible. Then you got the Dolphins, and for most people, it ends there. So some guys that I'd be potentially willing to trade for Flowers, I'd be looking at um, guys like Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin, um, maybe even Debo Samuel and Nico Collins as well.
Wow, Nico Collins too. I know you're a big Nico Collins fan. You just feel Tank Dallas taking over.
I mean, Nico Collins had a pretty good game, but yeah, I mean, does seem like Tank Dell is that first read there. And then they just have a lot of options. Robert Woods is in the mix. Noah Brown's been out, but he could be coming back too. So,
Yeah, I mean, I like the call out because with Mark Andrews out for the year, I think Flowers is going to get more usage. So, and he's on a bye week this week, so it's a great time to target him because, depending on the owner who has him, they may need the resources available to get that win because they may need that win now in order to make the playoffs.
yeah, definitely. They might not be afford to just keep Flowers on the bench, and they might need a playable player this week to get them through.
So my first trade target is actually another player who happens to be on a bye week in week 13, but that is wide receiver Gabriel Davis of Buffalo Bills. He had a great game at the Eagles. He had 12 targets, 6 catches, 105 yards, receiving and a touchdown. Almost had a second touchdown had he just went a different way in that choice route. But I think it's one of the things with Gabe is I know some would argue, well, why would you want to go after Gabe? This was a great week. You're buying high. I think the owner who has Gabe Davis though is more than likely considering the possibility of trading him away. The week before that, he had 0 targets, wasn't involved in the game at all with the blowout against the Jets. And then the 2 weeks before that against Cincinnati, he had 2 targets, and he also had a 0. So Gabe Davis has been super unpredictable. And so as a result, depending on what you're able to, give in exchange for him, I think that owner would have to consider it just because of how up and down he is. You just have to determine which matchup is best to put him in your starting lineup. He's got the bye in week 13, but the weeks after that, he's at Kansas City. On paper, it's a bad matchup, but we know that he's had success against them. Obviously, he had the 3-touchdown playoff game. I think that's going to be quite the shootout there. It's just, a clash of titans between, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Then you've got, the Cowboys. That is not the best matchup. But after that, he's got the Chargers and then the Patriots, who I think he could do very well during the fantasy playoffs. I think he's a great flex spot, and he's a guy you probably don't have to trade too much to get him. He's a great flex spot. Most teams at this point in the season, a redraft league, at least from what I find, they're not willing to make a big splashy move. Maybe if it's a dynasty, league, I think it's a different story because the team could be rebuilding or going for win now mode. But in a redraft, highly, you don't really see some big splashy moves at the deadline from what I can see in most of my leagues. I don't know if you agree with me on that one, Joe. But as far as what I'd be willing to trade to acquire Gabe Davis, the value for Gabe Davis is quite low. According to the Draft Sharks trade value chart that we're looking at here for values. So, I mean, we're talking, I mean, oh boy, I would trade away Josh Downs, Jerry Jeudy, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I think I would trade Pickens and Deontay because of that Pittsburgh offense. This seems, there's just not enough volume there. I'd rather rely on Josh Allen than Pickett. I think where I draw the line is possibly Rashee Rice, just based on his involvement as well. That might be close. But I'd even be willing to trade the likes of Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. Those are guys I really liked in the beginning of the year. But, Will Levis is not getting Hopkins the ball as much as I'd like to see it. And with Cooper, you got a revolving door at quarterback with the Browns. And unfortunately, it's severely impacting him.
Yeah, I guess just the one scary thing with a guy like Gabe Davis is he's just like the ultimate ceiling play. He's got the ability to potentially get you a goose, but then he's also got games like today where he actually gets the targets and, has a decent game. And like you said, had an opportunity for an additional touchdown in the game as well. If the communication's just better there. But I definitely think he's interesting. And like you said, he can always potentially be a flex play, especially if you're chasing points and need a higher ceiling guy.
Well, I think that's fair, but I think for maybe a team who maybe isn't a top seeded team in the playoffs, he's a perfect guy because you're rolling with house money anyways. So you want a guy who could possibly go off because the playoffs are just like any other week. So I understand the flip side of it is it gets you a donut, then they could cause you a matchup. But I guess it depends if you want to do high stakes or not.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is risky, but the reward could also be good.
So are you enjoying this video so far? Well, if you are, show your support to our new channel by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video. We'll be creating videos all NFL season long, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So, Joe, who do you have as your second trade target?
Yeah, I'm going to go with running back Isiah Pacheco. The last 3 weeks, he's had 16 carries, 19 carries, and then 15 carries this past week against the Raiders. Also found the end zone 2 times. It was nice to see him getting the goal line work in this one as well to get those 2 touchdowns. And I don't know as far as the status for Jerick McKinnon long term, but obviously he wasn't in this game, and it led to 5 receptions for Pacheco as well. Some additional passing game work, which you like to see. And, his schedule coming up, he's got the Packers coming up. Then they face the Bills, Patriots, Raiders, and Bengals, who aren't good against the run in your championship week. So I like his upcoming schedule. The utilization is encouraging these last few weeks that he's been getting. So I feel like the Chiefs could rely on him, especially, these wide receivers for the Chiefs just haven't been able to hold on to the ball. And they're going to have to get some more reliable players there.
I was surprised how much they involved Clyde Edwards-Helaire recently. I know
just today against the Raiders, though, really. But
will that be a trend moving forward, though?
I don't think so, because it was early in the game, and later in the game, I feel like when they needed it, Pacheco was out there. So I don't know if I'd be too worried about that. But yeah, early on to see Clyde, though, I was kind of surprised. But with McKinnon being gone, you would normally see McKinnon on 3rd downs. Instead, it was Clyde. So, I mean, I still think the fact that he was able to get 2 touchdowns and they utilized him pretty good. I like to see that.
I am with you, though. They're going to need Pacheco. That Kansas City Chiefs team is going to need him. They're going to have to rely on him because that passing game is kind of all out of sorts right now.
Yeah, and I think, they figured something out just to actually, hopefully they keep giving it to Rashee Rice. He's the one reliable target. I know they've been targeting Justin Watson a ton. MVS just isn't reliable. He wasn't reliable in Green Bay. Obviously isn't reliable, in Kansas City either. So I think that, just roll with Pacheco and Rice, and maybe this Chiefs offense can be turned around.
Well, and Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney are probably 2 of the biggest disappointments all year from a fantasy football perspective.
Yeah, and no surprise, Toney was inactive for this one, hurt again. That's been the story of his career.
It really has been. So my second trade target here, which you'll contend with me on, I think, but it's running back Najee Harris. Or, if you feel, for you, Joe, and for others out there, if you like running back Jaylen Warren, you could also go for him as well. I'm okay with either. But the reality is this Pittsburgh offense is not great, right? I mean, I think it improved slightly with the offensive coordinator change, but still not great. And this team is going to rely on the run game, and they're going to rely on their defense. That's just how this team is. That's the makeup of this team. And I will say I was pretty impressed. I mean, Najee did not have any targets in the game, but he had 15 carries, 99 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, and he averaged 6.6 yards per rush, which is really solid. But going forward, I mean, his matchups are unbelievable. He's got the Cardinals in week 13, which is a smash matchup. He's got the Patriots in week 14, which doesn't scare me either. That seems like a great matchup. Then you got the Colts. You got the Bengals, who he just ran all over, and then he's got the Seahawks. All of them are all good matchups. So, this offense is going to rely heavily on the running back game. I like either Najee or Warren. I think they both could do well for you. Obviously, Warren is more explosive than Najee. Najee hasn't gotten nearly the amount of volume I thought he would. You were right on that, Joe. Warren has become way more involved in the game plan than I anticipated, but rightfully so. He's really the splash in that offense that they need. But either way, running backs, they get injured all the time. I wouldn't mind having both of them, to be honest with you. Just, it could be a headache on who you start, but you never know who's going to get injured in your starting lineup for running back. So having them possibly in the stable to be able to use could be very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, surprisingly, against a good matchup, I was surprised that Najee was actually the more efficient player. I mean, you mentioned he was able to, hit the 100-yard mark there and 15 carries. I mean, Warren in the same game had 13 attempts and only got 49 yards against a good matchup against the Bengals, who just have been struggling against the run. I almost wonder if Jaylen Warren just relies too much on that big run, and if he doesn't have it, I wonder if he disappoints. That's where, honestly, Najee's been looking better of late. Wonder if he's the guy you might prefer to target.
Well, with the fumble loss, too, that didn't help Jaylen Warren today. Yeah. But he is a great change of pace back. He is that lightning. You got that lightning and thunder combo. He is that lightning that can just all of a sudden make a jolt, and make that move. So, but I like I said, I mean, I prefer Najee, but because I think they're going to rely on him. But either or, I think both would be great options for you. As far as what I trade away to go get them, again, these guys are not players that have a lot of value. And based on the trade value chart, it appears that they are basically identical. They have the same price of 39 value. And who you could trade away to go get either one of them. I'd be willing to trade the likes of James Conner, Devin Singletary, Brian Robinson, surprisingly on my part, because I really like Robinson, but I want to say his schedule is brutal. So I think I'd rather have those guys just because of the matchup, because it is a matchup game in fantasy. I would be also willing to trade Charbonnet. Again, his matchups are brutal as well. And when does Kenneth Walker come back? And then I would be probably, maybe I probably would trade Jerome Ford as well, although he's been good. But why didn't they give him the ball? It was such a confusing game plan there. I mean, you and I were befuddled watching that game. I think I'd probably be willing to trade him as well. I would draw the line on Ramondre. I'd rather have Ramondre. I believe he's got some good matchups on the stretch, and the Gus Bus has been pretty good as well. But yeah, I definitely would target those guys for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, as a Broncos fan, that was the one thing I was worried about was Jerome Ford running the ball, and the Browns. I don't know. I mean, I think Jerome Ford should be a good player going forward, but for some reason they seem to want to showcase DTR.
Yeah, it didn't make much sense to me. But that does it for our Week 13 trade targets. Probably ahead of your trade deadline if you're watching this. Most deadlines have either passed or it's going to be this week. Hopefully this will help you. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put it below. We're happy to help you with any trade proposals you have, whether you should accept or send it out. That's what we're here for. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.